I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Welcome to the educational meeting. We'd like to start off with public input 1. Somebody like to speak for public input 1? Yeah.
No, that's not you. Okay, no, that's not you.
He can speak, he's allowed to speak in public input 1.
You have anything to tell us in public input 1? Come on.
Anybody to speak in public input 1? All right, then we'll move into the superintendent's report.
And we have Dr. Schumacher is going to be presenting on the Hawaii trip. And does he have is the clicker up there, Mr. Fisher? It's okay, great. Go right ahead.
Well, thanks for letting me present and take you on a tour of the Hawaiian Islands. I know it'll be boring in comparison to the meeting you just went through, but I'll do my best. I'm just going to show you a typical trip. There's 4 islands on this, but we only do 3 per trip. Okay, there we go. We usually start in Volcano National Park, which is Hilo on Hawaii, the youngest island. Here we're met by a volcanologist. That's Darcy. She works at the University of Hilo, and she specializes in volcanoes, and she meets us on the first morning, telling us all about how the Hawaiian Islands formed. We visit Halemaumau Crater, which is an active volcano. In fact, there's some places in these videos you can't go anymore because it's erupting quite violently right now. But you can see by the pictures here, the ground smokes when you're walking across it because it's an active volcano. The kids get to see sulfur banks, and I get to rivet them with lots of chemistry. They learn about a'a and pahoehoe, which they learn probably something else in Mr. Amato's class. But a'a is the sharp lava, because when you fall, you go a'a. And pahoehoe is the smooth lava. And we also, Darcy knows all the stories about all the plants on Hawaii, and that's the ohia flower, and if you pick that, it will rain because the gods will cry. I'll tell you that story afterwards if anybody wants to know. And they get to see things like Devastation Trail, where the volcano was so devastating there's no life at all. And it's like being on another planet. You look for miles and you'll maybe see a stump that's left somewhere. But hike. Petroglyphs, we go down and we see the petroglyphs, which was the Hawaiian hieroglyphics. They told stories and the kids get to see them. We also hike at night down to the volcano. That's the volcano erupting at night. And like I said, right now it's really erupting. We also go spelunking, or caving as some people call it, where we go into caves and the kids get to turn off all their lights and total darkness. They don't like that so much. But and of course it's in the rainforest, so we're constantly wet, but that's okay. And we see many, many waterfalls. We hike to as many as possible. I think they got this waterfall was taken out of it. The one day that we were hiking the caves and the waterfall, it rained everywhere on the island except for here. So we went to the beach, where it was the only sunny place on the island. And this is a turtle sanctuary. We got to save a turtle who was wrapped in fishing wire. And there's all sorts of numbers on the turtles, and we come back in and report which ones we saw, and they collect the data. It's really interesting. It's called Richardson Beach. The typical lunch is we pack a cooler, and after all the hiking, we set up at a picnic table, and everybody makes a sandwich. And then there's always a crew that's on cleanup. And then every day, sandwiches. So by the day 6, they're like, sandwiches again, Shu? I'm like, I don't know.
You're on a budget.
That's what I ate growing up. What else you want to eat?
Or nothing to eat.
They asked the provisions delivered, but I don't think so. We also go to places like Punalu'u Black Sand Beach, where the turtles come up on the shore. This is one of the few black sand beaches left because the volcano keeps making them and then taking them away. This is Pu'ohunau, which is the holiest place in the Hawaiian Islands. It's the city of refuge. If you broke the kapu laws, like standing in the shadow of the king, that meant death unless you could get to this island. If you could get to this island, which was heavily guarded, your sins were forgiven and you could go back to society. So it's a very sacred place. It's very nice. That's the oldest island. And then this is the youngest, that was the youngest island. This is the oldest island, Kauai. And we rent out the whole YMCA. and we stay in these beautiful cabins, which the kids, they scream at first, but the front yard is, we play volleyball, ultimate frisbee. The backyard is that beautiful beach. And we just spend the afternoons there, because in the morning, we're hiking. At night, we're building fires, telling lots of stories, getting to know each other. That's the Kaanapali Coast. That's a very nice hike. We hike. Most of the kids can make it the 8 miles, but so if you can't, we always leave one teacher to go back with the people who can only do the 4-mile hike. Last year, only 2 people didn't make it. This is the Hanakapa'ai Trail. It goes up to that fall right there, the Hanakapa'ai Falls, and that's last year's group. I'm sorry, 2 years ago group. Everyone made it, like I said. Everyone's muddy at this point, and then you have to walk back 4 miles, up and down and up and down. But it ends at a beautiful beach. A typical night, we make all our dinners too. So if you're on cooking one night, the next night you'll be on cleaning. And everybody gets a detail. So, I mean, yeah, it's gourmet food. I think those are burgers or hockey pucks, I'm not sure. But they were pretty good after a hike. But we have things like tacos, spaghetti, stuff like that. We cook it ourselves. While on Kauai, we always stop at Poipu Beach, which has one of the rarest mammals on Earth, which is the Hawaiian monk seal. And they like to come up on the beach there, so. And we visit that on the way to Waimea Canyon, which is the Grand Canyon of the Pacific. We hike down to Pu'u Falls there. These pictures don't do it justice, but you can see it's a very steep, very beautiful hike. Some of these pictures are a little out of order. And then we also go to Maui. This is the first time. We went to Maui for the first time last year. And we went to Haleakala. And on Haleakala, there's the silver sword. The silver sword is one of the rarest plants on the planet. It only grows in Haleakala. It blooms once every 25 to 100 years. And even by stepping around the roots, you might damage the plant. It basically grows where humans aren't supposed to be. But last year we took a van up and we all rode our bicycles down Haleakala, started above the clouds and rode all the way through the clouds and ended up on a beautiful beach at the bottom. It was really quite incredible. My first time I ever did it. We also snorkeled Molokini, which is a volcano in the middle of the ocean there. And those are all turtles, not rocks. I don't know if you can see those. Those are all turtles. We love to go visit beaches with turtles. But we snorkel around Molokini for a day. That was an awesome adventure. We go out there on a catamaran where they serve us lunch.
Sandwiches.
No sandwiches. No, they had barbecue. It was good. And anytime we're not making sandwiches or lunch, I try to get them to eat the local cuisine, and Cooper never let me down. He's eating Loco Moco, which is a hamburger with gravy and fried eggs, which sounds really weird, but it's delicious. It's a local, so I try to get him to eat the local foods. And then the last day we usually spend on the island I lived on, which is Oahu, which has the famous Waikiki Beach. That's Diamond Head in the background. We hike up Diamond Head in the morning, which is a military base, and then we can look down on where we're staying. We also visit Ka'ava Valley. That's if you are a fan of Lost, or King Kong, or any of the dinosaur movies. They're all filmed in this valley. And we used to camp there in tents until they learned that they can make a lot of money bringing people on tours to see where Lost is filmed and stuff like that. So now it's a big movie studio, but we used to be able to camp in tents there. And of course, so here's Jurassic Park, that's the word I was looking for. There's the movie set of Jurassic Park. We got to see that on a private tour, which was really nice. One of my friends, she's a curator of Taro Patch that's by there, so she gave us a behind-the-scenes tour. And then we always go to the Arizona Memorial. That's the one thing I don't do with the kids anymore. I've done it too many times. It's heart-wrenching, and I don't want to get numb to it. So I stay in Waikiki. I meet up with some friends, and they go with the guides and the other teachers to the Pearl Harbor. Because I try to tell them that when they're reading that list of people that died, they're all about their same age. And to me, it's just such a sad thing. And there's still people that are trapped below. So it's a cemetery. And we get met by, we get a private tour. We get met by a park ranger who knows where we get to go there for free because we're a school. I write to them ahead of time, and they give us a nice behind-the-scenes tour. We even get to go on the Missouri, which is pretty nice also. And when the conditions are right, we get to pick up lava. I don't know who that handsome devil is, but that looks hot. And to this day, we've taken over 230 students to Hawaii. I think in this school, we've been doing it for 15 years. And over 28 educators. And it really is a hot trip. If you have any questions, I'll be happy to answer them.
Couldn't pay me to do
I was gonna say, do you need any chaperone?
We always need chaperones,
that.
but
Stand on real
Has to be a
hard.
teacher.
did I mention all the kids that go?
I tell you, my daughter went and it was the trip of her life. It was unbelievable.
I meet
It's a
kids from the
fabulous trip.
first 2 times we went, so about 20 years ago, who traveled all over the world, and they tell me it was the best trip of their life.
Yeah.
Because we try to stress them, they're away from home. You gotta make your breakfast or you're not eating. You gotta grab your water or you're not gonna have water. You gotta help clean, you gotta do this. Some kids are like, I don't know how to take out the garbage. I'm like, how could you not know how to take out the garbage? But they're all learning because they're used to getting a lot of things done for them, and now they have to do or it don't get done.
It's a great trip.
Excellent, thank you.
Okay.
All right, now we will move into the Transportation Committee recommendation from the committee members.
Is it,
It should be, yeah, the next.
is it queued up?
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I think the clicker's up there.
It might be in.
Oh, it might be, yeah,
What I was looking at before was,
yeah, sorry.
Something else next?
That's all right, they can.
so we'll just move ahead.
Just,
Can you do that,
Go
Mr.
ahead.
Fisher? Or you have it up there with the clicker.
yeah.
Good evening, everybody. So I'm here tonight as a member. I serve as the chair of the subcommittee on transportation. Thank you to the membership of that committee. Tonight we have with us Susan Kinsella, Ken Dorff, Caleb Kirchwell, and Chris Arbia is also a member of that committee. As a group, we've met 3 times over the last few months, and have worked to develop a good understanding of the program here as best we could. We were fortunate enough to have a visit from Maud Stevens, who's as you know, our transportation director, and actually Mrs. Graves joined us for one of the meetings. We've talked about, in general, the program, but one of the things that we wanted to review this evening, I mentioned this last week, or 2 weeks ago at the past board meeting, is that as a committee, we have talked about, and after speaking with Maud, Mrs. Graves, and learning more about the program, we believe it would be wise for the district at this point to look to have a study done of the program, a thorough review of the program. We reviewed as a group 2 of the proposals that we received, and believe Transportation Advisory Services, known as TAS, and some of the material that you may receive would be able to serve us well. The study will be broken into 3 components as we see it. One, again, I'm kind of reviewing what I mentioned at a previous meeting, and members of the committee, please join me and feel free to share some thoughts. But we look at the review in 3 parts. The first is something that's pressing as far as time. As a community, we have been approached over the last few years by different families to take a look at the current 1-mile limit for busing, and whether or not we believe, after looking at the costs and benefits of making a change, it would be a good idea to decrease that limit. And that would be a key part of this study, and it would be the initial piece done by this group because of the time sensitivity. If we want to be prepared for a May referendum, which we'd be asking the voters to make this change, we would need that to be done initially. I don't know if Mr. Dorff or Mr. Kirchwell or Susan, you want me to, I'll just keep going. And
We can add at the end, Matt.
You want to add in?
Whatever
Sure.
you'd like, yeah.
That sounds great. Our
you know, the second piece would be to do a full examination of the entire program, look at all aspects of our transportation system. And then thirdly, through the study, we would be able to receive some recommendations that will aid us in future planning. And as a school district, it would help us as we embark on some of the conversations with possibly the village or the town to work together on overall improvements of transportation in the area, not just the school, but we think that would be a tool that would help us with those conversations moving forward. So next, at our next board meeting, which is next Monday, the 12th, there will be an item on the agenda if the board sees fit with that. And this would be to embark on this study with TAS. Mr. Doyle?
Should I stand up? Or,
Yeah.
Sure,
No,
you
no,
can either.
Why don't you just come on up?
Yeah, okay.
Gotta get you on video.
Yeah, okay. Just, first of all, I want to say thank you that there is a transportation committee. I think it's great, and thanks to the board for making it happen. I notice it's a significant portion of the budget. It's also increasing. It went up like 40-something%. It was only about 2% of instruction. Now it's like almost 4%. So we have to think about it as a significant part. I also want to mention a little bit about process. We didn't get involved in this until after it went out. And as many of you know, I'm a consultant in my real life, so I know about consultants, and I think it's really important to have an RFP, no matter what, so you can define what they're going to do. In any case, after looking at it, there's only really was one proposal, because the other one other than TS was not very strong. But the TS one was actually pretty good, and we can talk about that separately, about why we thought it was good. It had quite a few details. But one of the things that we'd like to ask them to do is to also focus on saving money. Because I think any consultant should be able to save their fees plus something. So we want to make sure that's an explicit part of the proposal, that they're also saving money or finding ways to save money. And they do mention that in the proposal. The other thing that Matt mentioned is it was mainly about busing. It says transportation, but it's really about busing, because that's the biggest cost. But we know that this question of half mile versus 1 mile, et cetera, we can't answer that until we know, why do people drive to school? Why aren't kids walking? So this goes back into the question with the larger transportation. Now that's a little bit larger scope, but some of the stuff in their proposal implicitly says you have to look at more than just the bus, optimizing the bus budget. And I was so impressed by
Ms. Stevens, Maud.
Maud.
Stevens.
Oh my God, she's amazing. But she even said, she was quite clear to us that she knows what she's doing, but she's very micro. You know, so to have these consultants who have a very broad experience of how to optimize busing, but also look at broader transportation issues, is, we think, quite worthwhile. By coincidence, this morning I was at a meeting of the Village Transportation Group, which is really taking off. And I think for the first time in my 20+ years in Sag Harbor, we are ready for the school board and the village to talk, which has not been the case. So that's really important to as part of this process. As Matt mentioned, or actually Katie mentioned at the last meeting, if we're going to propose things like new sidewalks and things to make it transportation better, bikes, whatever, this kind of process can also help later, because we'll document things when we go for grants, et cetera. Finally, the other thing is, and actually Marianne Miller pointed out this morning, we really should work with the village, because as you know, the state is really pushing cooperation between, the more we cooperate with the school boards, the village, the more we're going to get money. You know, the more we look like we're trying to save our budget. And that's the final thing is we want to make sure the consultants are looking at outsourcing, shared services, because we're doing that in Sag Harbor. As I think, who's the?
Suffolk Shares.
Yes, as you mentioned before, to see what we can do for things like fuel or storage, or there are many opportunities to save money in transportation that we should take advantage of. So we felt, all of us, especially after Maud said she thought it was a great idea, I think that really swayed us.
Yes.
We think it's a good idea to invest this money now. I'm happy to talk more about it privately, or not privately, not privately, but offline, because we did read through the proposal in some detail, and I was frankly positively impressed. Any questions?
If they did it, if the board votes at the next meeting and they go ahead and do it, and I did ask this the last time, the results would be back to us in enough time at least to address point one in the budget vote.
Matt made that very clear, that's why he was pushing us to, we gotta.
Well, we knew
'cause
time was a factor. Sure.
Time is a factor, and we have to think, point one is people are getting so much pressure on point one.
Yes.
And that will be one of the things they're looking at. You know, a lot of people wanna go, have their kids be picked up closer because they can't walk along 114, for example.
Yeah, and that is yes, and that's what's on my mind, to know what the transportation company, services, what TAS will say.
Right.
In enough time for us to act if we were going to go the way of changing it for the next school year.
Exactly.
Point one, and then the rest would be ongoing.
Right.
They front end load that part, and
Exactly.
then they would continue their study long-term
They
into
could.
next year.
And I'm sorry, Stella Maris, there is no transportation that will ever need to go to Stella Maris,
You
right?
don't have to provide transportation to pre-K students.
Right, so there's nothing that we would be short-sighted not to ask now and include, because there is no transportation that's gonna go there.
Well,
No,
we're
but
looking for
no, but
data
every
around
time
the
you
whole
mention Stella
district.
Maris to people in the community, they say parking, parking, parking. So that also has to be considered, because parking, as we all know, is a really contentious issue.
That's our
But that
district.
was gonna be my question was, they're transportation experts, not just bus experts, correct?
That's what they propose. In
Because if
fact, they
they
don't use
are,
say busing,
well,
they
we have them
transportation.
at the table, you know, I think we should pick their brain about all of that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And Stella Maris is a great opportunity, but theirs just gonna be could be a parking nightmare.
Yes.
And one of the things that I said that's really important about having a consultant is when you move forward to write grants or to do they provide raw third-party data. Because
Exactly.
we have something, we have skin in the game, you know, we really do. And they don't. They come from a third-party point of view on everything.
So, do they have an understanding and provide to us also what like districts do elsewhere?
Yes.
Because I think one of the things is, I mean, if we do this, it could potentially cost the taxpayer more. It'd be helpful to know 20% of the districts like us do it, or 80% of the districts like us do it, you know?
Absolutely.
Because
That
a
was
law doesn't
actually-
require more than 2 miles away. And if we went to the mile, would they also be in touch with the village to see if that's possible within a village to have bus stops?
That was not part of the proposal, but when we looked at it, we said you have to include the village in this discussion because
we're
it's so
stopping in the
obvious.
right.
Yes, but I don't know, just so if you know, the village is now also proposing a parking consultant, and those of us on the committee wanted to make it broader. And there's gonna be, the Sag Harbor Express is having a luncheon on March 23rd that I'm going to. And I'd love, I'll put it out for you to come to that, because it's a really important discussion, including using the school parking lot in the summer and making sidewalks around the schools. It has to be part of that.
And I think seating's limited to that on the.
It is, we're trying to get it packed with people who said that. We just don't want to build a giant parking structure, because it's not that simple. Yes,
What's the cost of the consultant approximately?
It's like 10,000?
Yeah, it's just, I have the amount, it's 11,800 if it's out.
Okay.
Yeah.
I'm guessing they could save us that or more.
I would
Considering
make
how
that
big our budget is.
a goal, actually, make that a goal.
I have a couple questions about this. One is, can we also see the proposals that
Sure.
you're talking about? I think it'd be helpful. And two is, so I assume that because I think I asked this at the last meeting, if there was an RFP done and there sort of wasn't a real RFP, right? You just sort of told.
And Susan, I would recommend in the future there always be an RFP, even if
Yeah,
it's
I
one page,
agree.
personally.
We're supposed to have seen.
Because
was
a
good.
couple things that just, you know, and it seems like you guys have really covered it, but that I would like to be sure is articulated, is in terms of the ways to save, even if we said to them flexibility with the start time, not that we would necessarily do anything, but what is possible in terms of saving, in terms of consolidating routes or what have you, and if there was a slight shift, you know, what that means. In other words, letting them come back to us with that. And the other would be that how they could improve the walk and bike routes, because one of the things that I wonder is 1 mile might sound so, close, and in some parts it might be a no-brainer for them to walk, but I think we all know what the issue is with 114, and it's not safe. So
Exactly.
they will map that out and
Absolutely.
say, this one here is a problem, so that there's also another option to
Yes.
not just do a 1 mile, but say,
It is
We
1
have-
mile, it is
It
1
is
mile right
currently-
now.
It is
Right,
currently
it's
1
1
mile,
mile right
but we
now.
had the discussion, it could be half a mile for those areas which are considered dangerous.
Right, exactly,
That
that's-
would be part of the discussion.
right, okay, perfect, that's
Absolutely.
exactly what, exactly, thank you.
And is if this is also about transportation, you know, they probably won't touch this, maybe the village one is, but, you know, in our last snowstorm, when half of the village is not, the sidewalks are not shoveled, we have a good part of the village that our children and our staff cannot walk to school safely. And when I see our students walking in the road on the way to school, it's frightening.
Well, you will see a letter in next week's Sag Harbor Express on this very issue. And I'm happy to tell you that at least the village board now, Aiden Corish, who's new on the board, is passionate about that. And they're going to either enforce now, change the enforcement to make it happen, and/or purchase a plow for some of the areas of the village. That's the
And do it
proposal. But who is responsible for cleaning the sidewalk around the school? The school.
Around
Right.
the perimeter.
But it's to the school. Like you look at Division Street between here and Harbor Market.
The
It
kids
was-
are in the street
kids are
all
in
the
street.
time.
I have
doing that
pictures, by
road.
the way. I have pictures documenting
And
that.
Yeah, I pass them all the time.
Yeah, so
I work
that-
on Madison's the same way.
Absolutely. Chris, you're right. This year, this has become very critical, and this committee, that's one of the focuses of it, is making sidewalks walkable at all times. So, now this won't be their focus,
Right.
but it has to be, this is why the village cooperation has to be part of the discussion. The focus will be frankly on busing. But, and let me just say one thing. Let's say we found out that we could get let's say 20% of the parents who now drive their kids to school to actually have their kids use buses, let's say. Even if it costs the same or slightly more, that could be a good thing. So we have to really think about what optimizing means. It's not just about cost. It's also about efficiencies and, you know, because for parents it could be better to, you know, so it's not just about cost, it's about optimizing. But we want them to save money where they can.
Can I ask another question related to this? I know that in some people, a lot of families don't use the bus because they're at a part of the route that's so early,
That's like us.
that then the kid is sitting on the bus going all the way up and all the way back. And I heard a while back that you're not allowed to have your kid at a different bus stop. So in other words, let's say you're on this street and it's going this way, but the bus comes back to the school on the other street behind. Is it true that you're not allowed to have your kid at a different bus stop? That's not true, because,
Susan, I think what you might be
Not for
understanding,
pick-
if a
pick up
kid
and
lives
up.
less than a mile and wants to walk 700 feet over the mile, they can't take the bus now. So that might be what you're hearing. But that could be what.
no, I'm talking about something else. I'm talking about when they're in the
No, they
bus,
can-
whatever,
as far as I
but
know, they can go-
switching
yeah.
stops, because,
They can't cross some of the streets, so like if you wanted a shorter route and you had to cross Noyak, they don't have children cross some of the streets are just too dangerous to have children cross. Like.
No. Wait, can I simplify this? If I live on the right side of the street and the bus drives by at 6:20 on my corner, and my kid's still fast asleep at 6:20, and the bus then proceeds for a half an hour going around the block and swoops back down around and stops at the next corner at 6:44, can I run over to B spot instead of A spot because it's 22 minutes later? I'm assuming the answer is
We were
yes.
told no 2 years ago.
and I was actually told no. So I wonder if that could be something that could be looked at, because if we can consolidate and have more parents, use the bus because it's, they're
Right.
supposed, that could solve a lot of the other issues.
Absolutely. Oh, I don't know the answer because I didn't think that was true. First of all, there are very few, it doesn't loop. So
Yeah,
I got your question.
No, but she's.
I think
But-
what
but the
Susan's
point of it
saying
is-
is, one of the major complaints is the bus leaves so early that there's no way.
That's why
Right.
my kids don't take it.
So that's why we drove them to school for 20 years. So, if there's a way to run around the corner, or mommy's on the way to work and it times better, and Johnny could sleep another 20 minutes, that's what Susan's
Absolutely.
Yes,
Well, I think
exactly.
the point of it, they're open to looking at opening up the bus stop question. Even, we talked about maybe smaller buses, but that was more expensive in terms of drivers. So this is the kind of optimization that they're talking about. And again, Maud does this on her own very well. She has an algorithm and a program. But they have seen it in a much bigger context.
Right.
So they can give us more ideas.
Caleb.
Mr. Kirkpaul?
I I just want to mention that listening to a few of the things and all the different variations of what we might want to ask them, it's critical that the RFP be defined, because consultants do not like an ongoing list. And I've heard, oh, if we move up the time, if we jump across the street, the $11,000 doesn't go very far.
That's right.
And so we need to be very critical on what this RFP is going to get us, or it's not going to get us what we really want.
Thank you.
Well, I mean, that's part of the process, because there is no RFP now. They've made a proposal. We have to go back to them and say in this proposal, we're understanding this to mean A, B, C.
Correct.
And I'm happy for us to be part of that, but that has to be done. Because right now, they'll just give us what they want.
Right.
We have to clarify that we are understanding this to mean this, this, and this.
And my suggestion would be with that would be a timeline that you provide that they agree to with specific deliverables, not just an end deliverable a week before due and you realize it doesn't have what we need.
Exactly.
And I've worked with this company twice before, and I was a minor player. They worked with two great big BOCES, and if you've seen the work that they do, it's robust. They don't advertise, they work off just their reputation. So,
And frankly, Kay, they may come back and say, if you want that, this is gonna be 14,000.
no,
I think,
what
you know,
what I'm really conveying is
Yeah.
they'll do comprehensive work, because they've been doing this for so
Right.
long.
Right.
And this is just what they do.
Can I just, I love it. I think it would be fun if we have a robust conversation about 1 mile from the flagpole, but who decides the definition of dangerous?
Well, that is a question, isn't it?
See, I think
Hazardous,
that, in other words, I would hesitate. If, the way I understand it now, it's from the flagpole on the hill and the flagpole in Mr. Malone's parking lot, right?
Yes.
A mile away from the flagpole.
Correct.
Now, if I deem 114 as a mommy to be dangerous to my children, that could be my opinion, and maybe it's founded when they do their research. But I could also deem that,
Madison.
Howard Street has no lights and it's too early in the morning and it's dark.
Right.
And that's my mommy's personal opinion, so I
don't think they're gonna weigh in on dangerous. I think they're gonna weigh in on the costs, the related costs. And
Yes.
they're gonna weigh in on the related sidewalks that are available. And I think that they're gonna let you, as board members who know Sag Harbor, they're gonna provide you with all the related data, how much it costs,
And-
are there sidewalks, how are they
Right.
getting here? Because according to the Department of Transportation, it's never gonna be dangerous.
Yeah, we don't hit
It's-
that threshold.
Because you're not
Sure.
going over 25 miles an hour.
That's right.
Supposedly.
No, you're right.
and it's Sag Harbor.
And do you know how many students this affects going from a mile to half a mile?
Well, we're gonna get that, right?
Yeah.
You're gonna get that
Yeah.
information, as opposed to who's driving, who's not driving, how many people really take the bus, but they really don't take the bus?
And I'm sorry, are you really going from a mile to a half a mile? I proposed an elimination completely and door-to-door service.
That would be
Door-to-door
part of the
service?
examination.
For each student, door-to-door service?
That would be wonderful.
Some districts do have
Some
that in
districts
place.
do that.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Do any of the districts on the east end do door-to-door service?
Well, they do full busing. I don't know about the door-to-door, but full
Well,
busing.
and I don't want it.
Some districts do full busing.
Right.
Bus
And that means
stops,
that there's
yeah.
busing seats for everybody and they stop in
No matter
local
where,
areas
if you
everywhere.
live across the street from the school, you can hop on.
Yeah,
And
I'm
some-
sorry.
And some school districts have no busing.
Right.
Let me,
Right.
can I
Dobbs Ferry
rephrase
has
that?
no busing.
We're, in the RFP, are we saying to them, can you analyze what it would cost to go from 1 mile to half mile? Or are we doing both? 1 mile to half mile and 1 mile to elimination where everyone rides the bus?
We didn't ask that, that was not in the proposal.
We didn't even ask that specific. We asked decreasing the limit.
Right.
But we have to give them a specific
Yes.
amount of decreasing because that changes the cost.
And
Yes.
did you
So I would-
tell them a half, maybe you didn't get this far
We
yet?
did
No.
not.
Can
No,
you tell them 0?
Well, I think it's
So,
good for you to look, the proposal's pretty general. This is why I say this is not,
It's not baked.
it's
I-
not, no, it's
I
not
think,
baked.
I think when you use, we have such a small population and we have they use the same system we have, which you saw, we can call up on our system
for
where
the
every
routing.
single person lives and what sidewalk they live on
Exactly.
and where we would have what I'd recommend is bus stops, because then parents get to know each other.
Can you see who has a pool
No, no,
for
but
the
if you.
summer, so I could go
No,
over?
No, but we can see where they are, we can see every route.
Come on, that was funny.
That's Joanne's finder.
Sure, you can see the pool on GPS.
So, it sounds like, what I'm hearing is there's interest in finding out scope and cost of half a mile and scope and cost of no, requirement of.
Restrictions.
Right, no requirement of distance. But it needs to be defined, so, because those costs, the numbers and costs are different. So is that what the board is looking for to get?
Yes, I was, I
Because you
thought we
guys need
talked
to know
about
if you're
that.
working with the
We will go
consultants,
back
we
to
should,
them with that.
we don't want them to come back with something that doesn't answer the question, right?
Correct, because then we won't make it in time for May to educatedly put any kind of referendum on the budget.
But if they do transportation and not just buses, are they able to make recommendations to us, like, for example, this road right here, if that was to become a one-way and a bike lane was to be added to it?
No.
No, they're not doing that.
No?
They're not doing
No.
Oh,
that.
can we get something
No.
like that though?
No,
Not for
it's
May.
can you get on the
Not
bus
for
or off the
May.
bus? Can you, that's it. It's just gotta go 1 mile to a half or 1 mile to nothing
Or no change.
or no change. I think those are your only three
No,
options.
no, but Stephanie, I think that in this, it's implicit, I think we should also ask is what could we do to make more people walk the difference of the 3/4 of a mile?
I
That-
think
that's
walk
the-
that'll be their
Right.
longer range.
Right.
Well, exactly, that has to be by May.
But I
But,
think-
and it may be if we say, we add the bells and whistles and also the talk with the village, they may say, well, that's gonna be another $3,000 or $4,000, which may be worth it.
Right.
Remember, this, as you said, the word is, it's not really baked. This is very general,
Right.
we could read it. And it doesn't ask those specific questions yet, because there was no RFP. This was done very broadly.
So here's my, I'm just gonna throw a concern out there, and I know that there is a need because there's certain parts of the population or school district that are really asking for a change. My one concern is that we have to have, whatever the referendum is, has to be defined by April sometime, so that there's enough time to notify and publish.
March, actually.
March, okay, it is now February.
Right.
So in 6 weeks or 7 weeks, we have to have, not only have had the report back on something that's not defined yet, but also have decided as a board which way we're gonna go for the vote. And that's gonna be before they've been able to look at all those other factors to say, you know what, I think that this one problem could be solved if this happens, or if this happens. Is it premature for us to put something in front of the voters? I know there's a need, but it also feels hasty if we're not taking into account all those other things that could impact what ultimately would serve our community
And
best.
you know what, Chris, I agree with everything absolutely you just said. And wouldn't it be wonderful if you could encourage more people to walk? But if the analysis of that means that a street has to become one way the other way, or a tree has to get knocked down because it's ripped up the sidewalk and it's 200 years old and nobody wants to rip it out, that's unrealistic to think the village is gonna work with you to make any of those changes in the foreseeable future. So that has to be part B. I think that if we just isolate the outcry from the community of reduce the mile to something, either a half a mile or eliminate it completely, and then you're absolutely right, Susan's right, everybody's right, the B step would be, how could we then encourage folks to walk? What
Or
can we
do other
do?
things.
Walk or bike?
Where's a bike path, but to learn, to get deep dive into that minutia is never gonna happen to affect a change. And it might be 3 years from now.
If I
What's the
could,
date
I
of
think what,
March?
Chris, to go to your point, I think one way you could do it is say, that the A has to be done pretty rapidly, but you say, but
Right.
if these changes were made, because you know, the half mile limit will make it more expensive, obviously.
Yes.
You could say,
For-
the lack of a sidewalk on 114, the lack of a sidewalk here is costing the taxpayers of this district X
Yep.
every year. And then all of a sudden, say, why can't you put a $30,000 sidewalk that's costing $100,000 so
Exactly.
it becomes an argument.
Right. Yeah, but know that once you give, it's very hard to take back. Once all of a sudden you're providing additional
That's true.
services or services
That
to
is
new
true.
people, it's gonna be very hard to unwind. And I'm not saying that we shouldn't make a change, I'm just saying that it's hard to unravel it. What's the March go, no-go date of a decision to get into a referendum? You know, is it like mid-March, end of March?
I know that if we approved it on
The
the
12th.
12th, that they would be able to gather enough data to give you what the costs and what the related costs were.
I'd like to have the other committee members join in. Susan?
I just wanted to add that because we've already done that, we used to be a half a mile, and then we put out a referendum and made it a mile. So we did take it away.
We
And
did?
we're just finding, because of that, that it was dangerous. I just wanted to add a couple of things that Maud had said. She said in some instances, adding these stops to include the extra half a mile would only add 3 or 4 minutes to a route, maximum 10 to 15. She said it would add 25 to 30 students, and there would not be an issue for the elementary school because there's plenty of room on those buses, but it may be an issue for the high school.
Right.
And
That's
it
it. Thanks,
used to be
Susan. It was
2 to
important
1
to say that
too, right?
Maud made it feel as if this was not going to be a gigantic change. So that would have to be confirmed. That was what.
Caleb, did you want to add
Yeah,
on?
I want to say what she just said, and also, when we looked at the study, the task, it really wasn't for me about whether we went a half a mile. That was when we brought Maud in and she showed us how few students, how little time it was. That really wasn't the reason why we chose to enlist them. It was other things, cost savings down the road. If you want to just take Maud's recommendations on, listen, it's a couple minutes here, it's not going to cost us any more money. It really was just about the safety, especially whether 114, could be done. It's not a reason we'd hire them. It's the bigger picture. How are we doing on costs overall? What's
Other
happening in the
districts,
future?
right.
Should we have these type of buses? If we added another bus, those are all other bigger questions that they're capable of telling us.
Right.
The half a mile, it was already answered for me from them.
Well, they can
And I-
confirm it, but you're right. It wouldn't be so I agree. I absolutely agree.
So, and you bring up, it wasn't that many.
Any other questions or discussion from the board? Thank you so much to the committee for looking at this for us and bringing your
Thank you.
recommendations to the board. We really
Thanks, Mike.
appreciate it. Thank you so much for your time on this.
Scott, I'll go back.
Yeah, sure.
So we gotta go back.
I apologize. The order on the agenda is not the same as the order on the slide, so my apologies for that. So we'll go to technology.
Again.
Hello again.
Hello again.
So tonight I just want to talk about technology staffing, where we're at, and some proposed ideas that I'd like to put before the board to consider. As you probably know or recall, in a very short amount of time, we had our network and system administrator leave and take a position at Bion, and our network and system specialist one retire. So since then, we've been getting by with a temporary staffing solution, which is working out very nicely, but it's still only filling one of those 2 open spots, and it is only temporary. So keep in mind that from my perspective, the primary focus of the technology department is actually customer service. In addition to technology, it's really making sure that we're meeting the needs of everybody, the teachers, the staff, the students. So with that in mind, we address approximately 1,500 tech requests each year. Those are individuals sending us requests to fix all sorts of different things. And I want to point out that it doesn't include all the times we're grabbed in the halls. And while you're here, can you just, so those don't get logged as often as we'd like it to. Okay? So we do a very good job of meeting the needs, I think, of most people in the district. I think everybody will support me on that, but keep in mind there's additional areas of responsibility that go into what the technology team does, everything from training and maintaining our system security to designing, planning, budgeting, and implementing tech initiatives. So we have quite a bit going on, so the need for having a solution to our staffing issue is critical. Initially, the department consisted of 1 computer lab aide, 1 network and system specialist 1, who retired, as I mentioned, network and system specialist 2, who was resigned. What I'm recommending that the board consider, hopefully at the next meeting, is to fill the network and system specialist 1 opening with the employee who's presently our current computer lab aide, and there's a number of reasons for that. We followed the appropriate process. We canvassed all the applicants on the current civil service list for that title. Within the time frame that they were allowed to respond, we had no candidates respond to the Network and Systems 1 posting. We then confirmed with civil service that the employee that we're talking about here does now meet the requirements for that title, which he did not at the time of the last test, but he does now since he's been working for us for a period of time. So that time helps him. I've also discussed this with other administrators in the district regarding this employee's ability to do the job and to work in this new role, and everybody's in agreement that this makes perfect sense considering the individual. All right. So when you look at the financial aspect of this, okay, if you look at what we're currently doing, or what we were doing, okay, versus what I'm planning to do, you'll see that the end result is actually a cost savings on an annual basis of over $13,000. So because we're moving the person currently in this position to this position, that means the new person that we hire in the computer lab position, that salary goes back down to here. And the person moving from here to here, this becomes their salary as opposed to what we were paying the individual who's no longer in the position. So when you factor all these things across, all these moves actually net us a savings on an annual basis. So in addition to having a qualified person that everybody is comfortable with in this position, we're also actually saving some money 1 year to the next. Okay? Which brings us to the next situation with the Network 2 opening. Okay? My recommendation to the board at this time is that we continue utilizing the temporary staff to fill this opening for the remainder of the current school year. That will give me an opportunity to evaluate our options, to evaluate the individual in that position to see if that's a person we want to continue to have a relationship with, or if we have another option for replacing that person permanently with a school district employee. The person that we have on site now will not be remaining with us much longer. We know for a fact that they're sending us a new person within the next couple of weeks. That would be the person that would finish out the rest of the year, and that's why I'm saying I have to wait and see, because I haven't worked with this person. I have no idea what this person's capable of. The individual that's here now, I would have no problem keeping the remainder of the year, but unfortunately, he lives very far away, so he will not be staying with us. So we went through the process with the Network 2 position also. We canvassed all the applicants on the current civil service list for that title. We had 6 eligible applicants respond. Only 4 of the 6 showed up for their interview. And in my opinion, none of the 4 candidates was really well suited for this position. Therefore, I'm recommending we retain the temporary staff member for the remainder of the school year. It's a cost-effective means for ensuring we have a qualified person on staff. Plus, with this arrangement with the temporary staffing person, we also get the full support of the entire organization that we're getting this person from. So if we do need a higher level support, then that person can provide for us a higher level technical skill set. We do have the ability to contact that company. That's part of the arrangement, and they have people on staff that will support us, you know, whether it be remotely or on site. Okay. So when we take a look at that, there's really not much of a difference here, but retaining the temporary staff member versus the employee who was previously in the position before he left, we did a comparison from now through the end of June. We do save about $700 by staying with the temporary person. So that's really not the driving force, but at least we're not spending more than we would have keeping them employed. So if the board is in agreement, I hope to have have something on the next agenda next week for you to approve for us to move forward with this plan.
Anybody have any questions for Scott?
I just have one question.
Sure.
Going back to the net 1, when he moves to 50,000,
Mhm.
is that 50? Is that the civil service mandated?
That's what we've announced the position at. We have the ability to set the price on the position, and that's what we had advertised it at. So to be fair, we kept the salary at that position. To be fair to everybody who we originally announced the job to. If we raise the salary now, all those people who turned it down will be like, well, you didn't say you were going to pay X, Y, so we're keeping the salary exactly what was posted.
Well, because we posted it through civil service, so
That-
we don't have a choice.
That's what I'm saying, right. So anybody who
announced it.
interviewed, if we now suddenly raised the salary, they'd be like, well, if you'd have told me the salary was higher, I might have been interested.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So we're locked in to a minimum of 50,000.
Right. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Excellent. Thank you.
I like your slides. Just look at it.
Well, you also summarize well,
Scott,
so
can you give me
it's
the-
highlights,
And
which
you
is
don't
great.
read right off your slides.
Yes.
I just like that.
And this is, I'm next, right?
Yep.
Yep. This is just a reminder that in our current budget, we currently have unfilled secretarial civil service positions that will be coming in the upcoming board agendas. So I might not have another opportunity to update the board on these two positions. And one of them will be hired by, now that we have a building and grounds person that's here. He can be making the hire for his principal clerk, which we lovingly call secretary, because the secretary was formerly the building and grounds / athletic secretary. She took the position of athletic secretary and moved that and merged that with guidance. So she took her work that she was doing with athletics and took that to the guidance office with her and left open the building and grounds position, which is a good thing, because as we know with all our building projects, the building and grounds was becoming more and more work. So now we have that position still open, still in the budget for the principal clerk for building and grounds. So Marcus De Silva, that will be getting posted, that'll be getting hired, and again, that's a civil service position. Also in the business office, we have a account clerk typist that we put into the budget for last year, and we did not hire because I asked Jennifer Buscemi to not do the hiring when I realized she was leaving, because it really felt fair that it should be Dr. Kenter that does that hiring. So those things are in the budget, just if we see them, and it's been hard. We've had to have people paid overtime, they've worked long hours, and they've made it work, but it has been a burden to the district, there's no doubt about it.
Yeah, no, everything you said in terms of strategy makes total sense. What's the timing on getting these posted so we can get them?
You're gonna see the postings go up.
Okay.
Yeah, because the people are here now, and so
Right.
I won't have time to,
It's great.
normally we like to let you know that the position's coming, and then it appears, so these are not, these are part of the budget.
Thank you.
And one of them is an existing position. Also, I wanted to update you on communication coordination. We put in the budget last year for $50,000 to expand our communication coordination through, we were hoping BOCES, but let me take you back historically, because communication has been a real kind of a struggle here for the school district, because when I initially came, we were hoping to hire somebody, just outright. But I learned a little bit about our Suffolk County civil service, and anything that has communication in it is considered a civil service position. So we would not have that freedom to hire somebody because we have so many talented people here in Sag Harbor, wouldn't it be wonderful to be able to hire somebody who's talented right here in Sag Harbor? When I spent my first year here learning about how the hiring practices work, because every county's different, we would have to hire off a civil service list. So we wouldn't have that freedom. So we kind of pushed it back to the next year, and we kind of worked with the resources we had here in Sag Harbor, and we expanded some of our syntax communication. We had some stipends working, and I think we've climbed some mountains and done a nice job with our communications, but it's put a lot of pressure on folks. Most specifically right now, Scott Fisher's down 2 people in his department, and he's definitely feeling the burden, but doing a wonderful job. So again, we have sitting in this budget line $50,000. So I wanted to recommend, because now we're going to be getting into budget lines for how are we going to handle communication when we look at the high school, the elementary, that we try and pilot something, and I wanted to make this recommendation to the Board of Education, that we reassign the BOCES budget code of $50,000 that's still open, and we have the district clerk works 30 hours, a maximum of 29 hours per week, and that instead we do a 2-part, kind of like 2-part harmony. So we wrestle this down using less than $50,000, by bringing the district clerk up to 40 hours per week. Being a part-time under, if you use, so let me start again. We don't touch civil service if the person works less than 17 hours per week. So we could go out and find somebody 17 hours per week, but we have to be very careful because civil service will be scrutinizing that we're keeping that person under 17 hours per week. Well, things ebb and flow in Sag Harbor, and we have to be pushing out communication. So, when I thought about whoever is the district clerk, because that person has changed over the last few years, but I know that the district clerk is always working very carefully with the Board of Education. They're aware of the Board of Education's goals, the Board of Education's concerns. They attend the Board of Education meetings. They know of the news that's being presented by all the administrators during the monthly meetings. They work very closely with the administrators, and there's an ease of communication that goes back and forth between all the buildings. So it felt like the right fit to maybe try and pilot this. There has to be a second part though, and that is you would have to have a stipend in each building, the elementary, the middle school, and the high school, of a communication gatherer, while still keeping it under that $50,000 mark. And those gatherers would be the ones taking the pictures, writing the briefs, and sending that information to the district clerk to be gathering that information and packaging it. So hopefully we could have news that's being packaged and sent out on a weekly basis, because we have great news in Sag Harbor. So that's to give it some thought. So 72% of the district clerk's time would be spent on district clerk work during the week, and the other 27% would be spent on communication. This is just for you to digest and think about, for you to have questions about. You don't have to make any decision right now, but there is funds. I do want to give it, I would like to pilot it this year so that we can consider whether it's successful, so we could put it in the budget for next year.
Out of the $50,000, a portion would be allocated to the 27% communication.
For her, for the person,
Right, and then would a portion then be allocated to elementary, middle, high, and Stella Maris to as like a stipend for the information gatherer?
Yeah,
Somebody who's got their finger on the pulse of the
Finger
building.
on the pulse.
yes, yes.
Under this plan, who's writing press releases?
It would be your gatherers, and then, they'd
The
have to all,
gatherers would be writing press
they would be
releases?
gathering it and giving it to her, and she would be coordinating it.
With whom? Syntax?
No, with the district
No.
clerk.
Why do you, where are you getting press releases?
It's because that's a essential part of communication.
But it's not formal, we're talking about,
Weekly news.
Right, but
Syntax still has
was
the,
doing that.
Syntax still has that job. They still write press releases, that's still their job. We still
Oh, I
have-
thought you were talking about this instead of syntax.
No, we still
No.
have Syntax. We still
This
have.
that all
is
they
instead
do?
of hiring a full-time communications czar.
I've never heard Zara used like that. It comes with the crown and everything.
But aren't we doing now a pretty good job of, I think a very good job of reporting stuff that's happening? I mean, I know the athletics department's doing a very good job of that. You know, you see a lot of what is happening. The issue I always hear from parents, and I've said this before, is hearing this stuff before. And I'm not including, I think there's been a real shift in, there are a lot more emails that go
Yeah.
back out that are really helpful and what have you, but,
no, Scott is sending the information out.
Yeah.
Scott is gathering information from folks that are giving it to him, and he's shooting it out in email communication form. We have talked about and still need, and it shouldn't be in Scott's department, because it's not his problem, somebody that knows what the heck is going on in every single building and can inform the parents in a timely fashion. So if I wanted to go to that first responders night on February 5th at whatever time it started, I did receive a number of times communication, but it needs more information, it needs to come from somebody that coordinates it. And we've had I think, a lack of a human being in this role for years.
I think what you, like, what we're thinking along the lines of is like the elementary school PTA newsletter. That's just a one-pager that's got
Everything that's going on.
everything that's going on.
Well, may I make a suggestion? When the communications committee was originally formed, it was because there was a lot of dissatisfaction in the community, including the parental community, students, but community at large. And so I remember I was part of the committee when it initially formed, and there were two initiatives, recommendations they brought to the board. One was this position. In that recommendation, there was some information, including what the job description is in similar districts, as an example. I think it's helpful to circulate that so that there's a clearer idea, at least of what this looks like elsewhere, because we had actually surveyed parents, teachers, and staff, and asked them about communication, got feedback, and that informed it. We were supposed to do a follow-up, a follow-up wasn't done. It might be interesting, actually, to see where our problems are, but we hear anecdotally what they are. But, you know, I'd be happy to dig that up and circulate it if you don't have it, Katie. I think you were new when the recommendation was made to you, but the committee was formed a year or two beforehand. But I think it helps to look at that so that we can understand, okay, who's really doing what, and are these roles going to be well suited? Part of this too, we're talking about giving additional responsibility to an individual already here, so I think part of that has to be an executive conversation. But the way that it was originally teed up was certain functions would require someone who has certain skill sets, experience and skill sets around communication. So I think there's a richer conversation to be had, but at least initially I can also tee up what was originally recommended. That might be helpful.
Any other comments from the board?
We're about to vote and approve, I'm assuming, I shouldn't assume, the board is going to approve business item number 1. Right? Sooner or later tonight, we're gonna approve that the kids, any students in grades 9, 10, 11, and 12 could go on a Hawaii trip. They will go and have come back before the email goes out. That's the issue. And it's just a big fat issue.
Well, the other recommendation of that committee had to do with, and I don't know if it was, I'm trying to remember if it was Syntax or was doing it with someone else, coming up with some kind of communication protocols, so, and having some training so that it's infused within the DNA of the district. Because to your point, it's not about just 3 people, it's all the individuals have their own responsibilities, their own projects, they're running their own clubs, whatever. And iteratively, there's stuff that has to be communicated out, and communication is a skill set that people learn and are taught. Not everybody in every job in any company or school district just automatically knows and does well. So that, you know, there may be a need for that.
Has Syntax, as part of the work that they've done, have they ever put together for the district communications plan?
Yeah, look, it's I've been sitting here for 3 years. Here's what Syntax does. The Sag Harbor Union Free School District has just purchased Stella Maris. Ta-da! They're big line stuff. They're not, hey parents, wake up. If your kid's in high school, last night the Board of Ed approved the trip to Hawaii, and before you blink, it's gonna get sold out, so we're giving you a heads up. Syntax doesn't do that.
That actually isn't, I appreciate that, but that is actually not true. I was in the meeting with Syntax and the superintendent.
When's the last time you got an email from
Hold on,
Syntax?
Let me finish. They actually have people, and I'm not suggesting we do that, but their districts do hire them, where they have a staff member that embeds themselves 3 or 4 days a week in that district, and does that, you were there, does that communication.
That's what that was
That's
gonna
what
be.
they're supposed to replace that.
That was supposed
Right,
to be
but they do
4
do
days,
that.
that was supposed to be a 4-day-a-week person.
Right.
But the reason we didn't make that move was the administrators really felt like Sag Harbor's is its own culture. And you really have, the learning curve for somebody that was Syntax place, we really felt, on second reflection, it was gonna take too long. It was
I
just gonna
agree.
take too long for somebody to learn Sag Harbor culture, and to really dial into what the Board of Education's up against, what the administrators are up against, what, you know,
But that's
getting
why
this
we
pushed
need a
out.
communications plan, and I don't think that's ever been part of the discussion or, and that, I think is
But
part of
it-
the issue.
Susan,
In
with
other
all
words,
due
well,
respect,
looks
it
like
has
an
been.
audit. No, they haven't. It's
So
never happened.
I think that it would, I personally would be interested in, hearing that recommendation. I've been on the board for as long as Katie's been here, and I've never gotten recommendations from the community, so it must have been before our tenure. So if-
No, it
We
was.
sat
it's-
on it
it's-
together, Chris and I.
It started before Katie was here, but the recommendation about having a,
Full-time
having
person.
a full-time person or a consultant do it for 30 weeks, or, 30 hours or 40 hours like East Hampton, at least at the time had, was made, during Katie's tenure. And
Oh, got it.
so,
And that's
anyway,
when
I can take
I
it.
came up against the
Got
civil
it.
service thing that,
Got it, got it, got it.
And it's been in the budget, and we never filled it, and it's,
Yeah.
Got
but
it.
you
I
gotta
can
have the
recirculate
right
that.
person in the house that's got their finger on the pulse to be able to implement this effectively.
So,
that-
but we don't need to make a decision about it tonight, but did, our other board members wanna chime in at all before we shut down the conversation on this particular item?
I just wanna be clear what Syntax does.
Syntax is really, really helpful
They're
to
very
me.
good.
They're very helpful to me, and they provide things like, they do the press releases, and they do like our budget, a newsletter, which is incredibly helpful, because it's about making sure that all of the legal pieces that you have to have in it, that if you make one misstep, things are, it's
Problematic.
it's really problematic, and they follow they know your timelines, so when it comes to the budget season, they also provide, emergency services, so when, if there's a bus accident, they know the laws behind the bus accident, they give you all of the communication pieces, because they know other bus accidents that have happened across New York State, so they can give you all the dialogue, and they're there at 3:00 in the morning to talk you through it.
Yeah, they're good for like crisis type stuff,
Yeah.
or managing, yeah.
Newsletters.
Yeah.
They have a whole portfolio of services, we use them for a portion of that.
Right. So one of the things is, like, if there was a flood, they would be here, or if we had a fire in a building,
They
what
fly
kind-
at 50,000 feet.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and they tell you, like, what.
Not Hawaii.
They're there to give you emergency protocols, how to manage staff, how to manage teachers, how to manage families, what incident protocols, that kind of thing. It's very, very helpful.
You guys have any questions or thoughts right now?
But, so I think you're saying that they don't, what Stephanie's saying, communicate events. They're more.
They're not down here at all level.
But they do press releases. They come out, they're probably out every week. They're
Like
out
the
4
musical's
times.
coming up.
They'll do a press release on it, yep, they'll do a press release, but, and they'll make sure that things get into, like when we had our athlete made 1,000 points, they'll make sure that gets into Newsday, and that gets into, so they'll do
Big ticket items.
big ticket
Right.
items.
And in
Right.
some districts, they have an employee who would be the one sending the emails, writing the emails that go to parents. But we feel as a district, we need somebody who's not from a third agency, but someone embedded and local. So that was the veer in the road we did a little while back.
Yeah.
Any other questions about that? All right. Next is the calendar.
Yeah, I just wanted to go through, because I miscommunicated to the board, I made a mistake. Is snow days, school is closed on January 4th, 5th, and 30th due to snow and bad weather. We used 2 designated snow days, we only had 2 snow days, it was a short calendar year, so we only had 2 snow days built in. I'm recommending 3 for next year. My former district at the base of Ski Mountain had 8 to 10 snow days a year, because we started before Labor Day. We had like 5, 6 days.
Unconstitutional.
I know, you guys aren't gonna go there with me. Use 2 designated snow days for January 4th and 5th. School will be in session, on Monday, April 2nd, to cover, school for not being in session on January 30th. If schools are closed for 1 or 2 snow days, we'll have Tuesday, April 3rd, and Wednesday, April 4th, are potential makeup days. So just so we're clear on that.
So the
Wait.
2nd is a Monday, we now have school on Monday.
Yes.
Yes, but I do want to note that we are still closed on Friday, March 30th, as it is Good Friday.
Yes,
Okay.
yep.
And the,
And-
go ahead.
And this is, you have this in your packet, this is the draft calendar that's been put in front of this has 3 snow days built into it. And I'd like to have this, you have a week to look at this, but I would like to adopt this at our next Board of Education meeting. We do, the administrators have looked through this. I've given it to the teachers' union to look at. And this is for the Board of Education. Again, we do have 3. This is the longest school year we'll have in a 7-year cycle. So if you look how late the graduation is, it's the
goes into July 4th.
it's the longest. This is the longest school
Oh my
year you'll see
gosh.
it in a 7-year cycle.
And if we had a on-site communications director, this is how this would read. Attention all parents of 2019 graduates. As you're planning your child's graduation party, please note that the graduation on the Hill will be a beautiful, sunny, very late Saturday in June, the 29th.
The, can I request that this be posted as draft on the school website so that if the community wants to weigh in on it before we vote on it, they have seen it?
With Stephanie's headline.
Well, only because we're graduating on June 20, I have to push the party out now.
Yeah, yeah, and you have Regents exams that week too, so you can't.
You
have the
can't
week
budge.
either, yeah.
I
It's gonna
see
be
it.
nice and cool in these hallways and classrooms.
Okay,
We're getting air conditioners. Phil, you know that?
We're getting air conditioning.
We need central AC built in this budget.
well, you have to do a building project to do that. You're gonna have to land something on the roof.
All right, anything else for superintendent's report? Nope. All right, let's move to business items. Can I get a motion to approve business item number 1?
So moved.
Second,
Any discussion?
Sounds
I wanna go.
horrible.
it's fabulous.
All those in
Great.
favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Motion carries.
Can I ask one quick question about it though, and maybe Principal Nichols knows the answer to this. The Hawaii trip, is that annual or is it every couple of years?
Really depends on the availability of Dr. Schumacher. And this year it was, the real reason it came up in last minute is they were hoping to go to Australia, but there wasn't sufficient student interest, so they proposed this instead. But typically, when he started, he would go every other year.
And I'm only asking because it's helpful for parents if they have a junior, if you're a junior and it may not be going next year, then you may decide to do it this year versus wait.
Yeah.
So that's why if there is a way to have a clear understanding that, it might influence people.
I don't, that makes sense from a proposal standpoint, I guess, but you can't really, I can't say to Schumacher, commit 2 years out if you plan
Right.
on doing this. Just
Okay.
because he's got kids and.
Right.
I'm sorry, where are they going on February break, if anywhere? This week, right?
the only
This
trip?
February? Or nowhere?
Is this the only trip this year?
Nowhere, right?
Some years there's two, there's one
No,
to
I
Europe,
didn't
one
think
to
there
Hawaii.
was a trip. I could be
I
wrong.
have to look.
We could have approved them in this meeting and we don't know. We could ask Vicki.
Items for discussion, there's, according to the charters, there's a couple of committees that we are not in alignment with our charters. The first is the EFPC, is supposed to have 2 board members on it. Tommy John was on the EFPC. I didn't hear from anybody showing any interest in being on that committee. Is anybody changing their mind?
What was it? Yeah.
Educational Facilities
Oh,
Planning
that's
Committee.
Yep. I've done my tour doing that.
All right, so it's requiring 2. I will be the liaison for that committee. That's also the committee that houses the Transportation Committee that's been doing the great work on this project that was presented tonight.
Does that subcommittee need a Board of Ed person on it? Because I could do the subcommittee, if you needed somebody separate. If you don't, that's fine. Transportation subcommittee. And know Tom
I
was
think
on
that because it's part of that EFPC, I think that the charter is the same
Okay.
for both, but it's supposed to have 2.
I'm only asking because I know that has separate meetings. I couldn't commit to doing both.
So maybe you and I can
that's
tag
more
team.
temporary.
Yeah.
But I could do like some temporary meetings for that subcommittee. I couldn't do the regular year round. but just because I'm under the committees, obviously, and liaisons.
Yeah, okay, so maybe between the two of us, we'll make sure all of them are, or at
And
least
this is
covered,
just,
or at least
and this
they
is
know.
just the end of June,
Right.
because July 1st, they're all,
All right, thank you. And then, audit was the other one, but Susan said she'd be willing to do that.
Yes.
Thank you so
Perfect.
much. And then athletics, we have now 3 board members, and according to the charter, we're supposed to have 2. So, I had asked the board members how they felt about it, and all wanted to stay on it. And then Chris actually had a good suggestion. This is, again, these are kind of stopgap measures to get us through to May, because your seat is up that night, it's not July. So maybe if we just kind of stay the course for the next few months and see what that election holds, we'll cross that bridge when we get to it, but I would like to get the will of the board on it. Am I understanding the suggestion?
I mean,
thought it was
it
a good one.
would be that the board would, if the board was supportive of kind of suspending that rule for the balance of the year because we have unusual circumstances with the temporary situation.
Right.
That's for the athletic committee?
Yeah.
Hey, Eric, do you care if 3 board members hang out on your committee until May 15th? Just say no. Okay.
Hey, Katie, do you have any thoughts or any objections, I should say?
I want somebody to jump to the Educational Facilities Planning Committee.
Exactly, I
because
think
we have
one of
to
them
name
should go to
Stella
that.
Maris, we have building projects, we have a lot of work to do.
You can put my
Yeah,
name down.
but,
Okay.
all right, and
Diana
it's
said-
nothing personal, but
Okay.
to me, it just seems redundant to have 3 members on a committee when we're all so stretched and doing so many. And Susan and Chris both have students who are in the athletic program, so I think that's helpful during the committee. So, you know, I mean,
I like it, I'm staying on.
okay.
There you go. All right, as long as the board doesn't have any objections.
Now what are you gonna pick up?
See, yes, why don't you take facilities then as well?
You don't like that one?
Well,
He never.
All right.
He never sticks up for himself, I'm so proud.
All right, at this time, I would like to move to public input 2.
Can I have a request for old business? It's not on the agenda, but I thought it'd be helpful to create
sure.
some clarity. I think at the last meeting, and it was reported in the paper, that it was the law that was the reason why we couldn't have students eat on the bus. But we have surrounding districts that do have students eating on the bus. So I just want to be on their buses in East Hampton and Southampton. So I think we want to be careful about, is it the law or that's how we do it in Sag Harbor? Because I don't believe there's a state law, a local law, or a school board policy, which is the law of the district, that does prevent it.
There is the state law says that you can eat on the school buses.
Okay.
They encourage that you have a monitor if you're turning your back on them,
Yeah.
on children, and that you have the Heimlich maneuver posted if they're doing that. But school policy is known as the law of the school district. So I think I'm always trying to train people that when we're talking about policy, we're talking about our local law, governing law. And when we had the OCR complaint, the attorneys from the Office of Civil Rights, when they were working with myself and the administrators on that complaint, which was for child with allergies, profound allergies, said that we had to, their interpretation of our policy, the way they read our policy, not how I read it, the way they read our policy was that we were out of compliance by children potentially being exposed, and so we had to bring our policy back to, so they had other things that they, like we had to do training for all of our staff, so they gave us things we had to do, and one of the things we had to do was their interpretation, not my interpretation, Office of Civil Rights interpretation of our policy was that we had a threshold. How could you say that, when they read our policy, how could we say children are safe on our buses?
Oh, I see, so you're saying that their interpretation,
Right.
not our attorney's interpretation, but their
The
interpretation.
Office of Civil Rights
Their
said,
interpretation said that even though our policy doesn't say you're not allowed to eat on the bus, because it uses the word safe.
So it
They
says,
say
it says you'll keep children safe
Right.
from allergens in the following areas, in the classroom and here and there. Those attorneys, when they looked at that policy, said, okay, what's your threshold? How are you doing that? So you better take it back to policy and tell us how you're gonna do that. How are you going to maintain that bus is gonna be safe, you know, so it was their interpretation of it, it's those darn lawyers.
So, all right, just because, you know, we have policies related to our bus, there's two, you can give legal eye to both of them. Let's go like this, we love attorneys, don't sue us, please. But I just wanted to say that because people have pulled up our policies on busing, and it doesn't say anywhere you can't eat on
It
it,
just
and
says
so.
that we would monitor.
Moderate, so I think, you know, we are communicating two very different things, and I think it's important for our parents to know, if your child is playing sports in the surrounding districts, they don't prevent eating on the bus.
Correct.
And so, you know, I just think that we have to have kind of full disclosure,
Yeah.
that's all, and clarity.
Thank you.
Can I just say one other thing? I mean, obviously, as a difficult situation came up, we had a complaint, and there's a child who's at risk, and nobody wants to put a kid at risk. But I just feel that the athletic committee has talked about this issue for a long time, the wellness committee has started to talk about it. There are some good ideas on the table. I would just encourage us as a school to find a way to fix the problem
And
that
we've been,
addresses both issues, so that kids can eat, who need to eat, and that the kid who needs to be, or the kids who need to be safe, need to be safe. And I think you said it very well last time, because I've noticed online, there's been a lot of discussion about it, and I think there is a need for more education about what is going on with allergies today. So I think there are some people who don't understand that allergies have gotten worse.
Life-threatening.
And they're life-threatening, and that, you know, as you mentioned, if there's residue, they can touch it, and then, you know, they wipe it on them, and so that's an issue. So, but I heard lots of great ideas at Wellness. I'm sure Athletic Committee has great ideas. I think, let's just get this fixed.
right, and we've been directed by the Office of Civil Rights, by the attorneys, that who has to fix it is our policy committee. So, you know, if you have great ideas, give it to the folks on policy, and I think our administrators are working really hard on it, and it's our next meeting, is.
On Monday, we're gonna hear a recommendation?
Our next policy meeting.
Okay.
So what they've done is they've heard from all the experts,
Yeah.
so that they have an understanding of what they're looking at, and, you know, how are all the ways we communicate out what children have, and so they have an understanding, and then we're gonna get now recommendations from the administrators on how do we keep this, how do we feed the children? Gotta get them fed, that's all there is to it, but how do we do it in a safe manner, so we are still compliant?
So what's the timing that the policy committee would come back to the board and the public with that recommendation, just so we can manage expectations?
I would say within 2 months. I mean, that's our next meeting is the how now. How do we do this?
So hopefully sometime in March then. we should
I hesitate because.
I'm just worried about, you know.
Yeah, and I feel everybody's in extreme urgency, but the attorney side of this that we're under, and my job is to protect the district. If we were ever to put a child's life at risk, what we're trying to do is every single coach is charged with making sure our athletes get fed. And our elementary principal or middle school principals, or middle high school principal, figures out how they stop those buses and get the kids off to get them fed. And that is also the charge of those coaches. And we now need to answer this complaint and do it in a thorough way. I think we're gonna push through fast, but I wanna make sure we do it right.
Has there been a communication to all of the parents that their children are not allowed to eat on any school bus?
It's communicated through the coaches.
No, in the morning on the way to school, when they pull out their breakfast, my daughter has breakfast bars, pulling out on the bus to eat them, or.
Chris, it's not a perfect situation.
No, I know it's not perfect. What I'm saying is, if we haven't as a district communicated it to parents and students, I think that we would want to do that. That's just my suggestion.
We've done training for every bus driver, for every single staff member throughout the district.
Can I just throw out one thing that I read online that somebody, a member of the community, suggested? This is not an idea from the Wellness Committee, which had great ideas. But I thought this was interesting that somebody said, why not have some designated rows on the bus where there would be no eating, so that any child who would have allergies would be sitting in those seats, so they would never come into contact.
point
And then
them
you-
out.
well, but you could have like the first 4 rows you can't eat, for example, and then, you know.
The children feel very discriminated against when you have like peanut-free tables that they have to sit at.
Yeah.
It makes them feel terrible. I really, you're getting into the weeds. We're gonna do a really good job.
Well, then just get it
Really,
fixed, please.
yeah.
And communicate it to I would really suggest communicate to parents. They should
But
know.
nothing's changed in the rule that's been like this for years.
It's not. Parents,
It's not.
the average parent does not know that their child is not allowed to eat on the bus. I can tell you that.
They
don't read the rules.
And the average child does and eats anyway, so it's not a perfect world.
Okay. So then, okay, so
It
if parents don't
depends.
feel like it's important to inform the parents of this, that's fine. It was just a suggestion.
Because depends on the bus driver, it depends on the bus, here's my only question, if a team leaves a contest and the driver stops in a restaurant or a pizza place, then anyone with an allergy in a public place, are we off the hook if they stop?
No.
A child should be advocating for themselves by the time they're in middle school, high school.
So
So they're getting off the bus, they're
Yes.
gonna eat, and what the concern is that some of the debris be left behind and a little get
on the bus, right,
That's
so
the
it,
concern.
so we are within whatever policy we have without breaking our own, because that's the bottom line, we own the buses and we made the policies, so that's the outcry, we get it, and no one wants to put anyone at harm. So one of the things that I see happening much more often than not right now in the past couple of weeks is that the drivers are stopping and letting the kids eat at a pizza place or a deli or, and I just, once they're off the bus,
That we're fine.
we're fine.
We're fine.
That's great.
Yeah, and each child has a plan. Every child that has allergies, they have a 504 and they have a plan. And those parents have advocated for them with EpiPens, they all have plans. And that's very important.
Panera bread for everyone.
Anything else for the meeting? Can I get a motion to convene to executive session?
I have public
Oh, I'm
input.
sorry, thank you, public input too. I lost my track, thank you. Hang on, I got a little spiel. Give it to 3 minutes. Comments, yeah, she does.
Come on.
Comments directed to the board president. We may not discuss it, state your name for the record, you're being recorded. Hello.
Hi, how are you? How's everybody tonight? Susan Kinsella. I promised my daughter I would come here tonight. She wanted to come herself, but she had too much homework to sit here and wait until the end of the meeting. We had a presentation a while back about the food in the cafeteria and how wonderful it was. We had beautiful pictures of all the new food. Yet my daughter is still constantly complaining about the quality of the food. And I said, well, at the board meeting, I saw pictures of all this really good food. And she said, Ma, that's true for the middle school, the people that eat first. By the time the older kids get there, all that food is gone. What's left is what no one wants to eat. So I got some texts from her today, emphatic that she no longer wants to be forced to eat in the school. She had bought some orange slices or sliced fruit, and it had mold all over it. Fortunately, she realized it before she started eating it. She said she talked to Mr. Guinan, and he suggested I'd contact you guys to get the $3 back. But she really wasn't concerned, unfortunately, about the $3. She really wants to be able to have something good to eat. So I don't know if she's correct in her assessment. Is there so much food and you sell it until it's gone? Or there's, how many different lunch periods are there? Two or three?
Three.
So, I mean, is it possible to, like, say, we'll have this much of this for each meal, or can these kids have an alternative of going off grounds to get something to eat? I just, Provisions is a great place to eat. I wouldn't mind if my child went there at lunchtime to get something to eat if they can't get something good here. But it's not fair that some kids get something good and the rest don't. And she's really bothering me, so I'm here.
Thank you.
If I could stand up in public input too, I'd repeat that. So I just wanna go on the
You're hearing
record.
the same thing?
I
Yeah.
have to have you guys
We
come
deliver
down to the
lunch
cafe.
every single day.
Oh my gosh, they had
every day.
Cubanos the other day. They were.
My daughter did say if you don't get there first, that they run out. That's what
I'm sorry, Brittany, can you help me? What time's first lunch period?
10:42,
And who is it in?
sixth grade.
Sixth grade.
Sixth grade.
And my
And
daughter's in
babies.
sixth, and she says if you don't get down there first, it's gone.
And then what's the next one? Seventh and,
It's 11.
They're just 41 minutes
period.
apart.
no, but is it seventh and eighth go
Seven,
together?
eight next, and then high school.
And then high school's the third, so high school's at, whatever it is.
12-ish.
12-ish, yeah, hang on.
12.
I
So
still
just-
scotch tape there.
Just my
schedule.
experience is that and maybe, maybe there are incidents where this is not the case, but I've been down pretty regularly at the beginning of the 3 lunches, and the food looks to be the same at each of those lunches. But there may be incidents towards the tail end where kids aren't getting food, but it looks to me like they're doing a pretty good job.
I mean, I assume they restock before.
They
we-
restock, but at the same time, we own, yeah, and there's,
They do run out of, they do run out of.
they run out of
certain
the
headliners.
wraps sometimes, depending on what the kids want for the day, and the fruit and stuff sometimes. But
so-
there's only 2 people working in the back of the house, so therefore, we talk about this on the wellness committee, so there's only 2 people working at the back of the house, and if you think of it as a restaurant, it's a hard thing to do.
Yeah.
So they're serving while they have to
Hundreds.
restock at the same, and the cashiers are there, so they're not seeing the restocking sometimes.
But there's always
But
sandwiches.
there's always
there's
sandwiches
the
there, but they might not
granola,
be the ones that they
yogurts.
want, like the barbecue chicken sandwiches, barbecue chicken wraps, those go really fast, as well as the tomato basil. Those go really fast sometimes, so those won't be restocked sometimes if they run out.
Okay, question, the rule about how old you have to be to leave at lunchtime,
So-
current seniors? No.
So I'm very defensive about this. Right now, seniors have privileges to leave. Those privileges can be taken away if they're not in good academic standing. I was principal for a number of years when we had an open campus, and a number of problems that arise when you have an open campus make it, in my opinion, not a smart move to go that way. Because kids do, left unsupervised, unfortunately, they don't always make good decisions. There were many years where kids would jump in a car and try to drive to Southampton and back in a 40-minute time frame. Sometimes they wouldn't eat, they would ingest other things, so,
Sometimes they didn't come back.
yeah. So I think I would recommend very strongly not moving towards an open campus.
Okay,
Anybody else for public, well, anybody
she
else for
wasn't
public
done.
input too? Did you wanna add on?
I just had a question, do we, I mean, I know that we've made some improvements and changes in the cafeteria. Do we survey the students to get their feedback on what they like and don't like, so we can continue to iterate in a way that reflects what they want? I'm asking Katie since she's the employee, yeah. You know?
I know they're talking to the kids constantly in the cafeteria, but I don't know if they've done a formal survey or not. We'll have to ask the cafeteria manager. Right
Yeah.
now, our cafeteria manager is away on a family leave act, and we have her sub, and the food has been outstanding. It's been full, it's been creative, they have a fully stocked grab and go all the time, all the
I'm
time.
gonna make a suggestion. It's not hard to create a survey in SurveyMonkey. It costs nothing. And it might be good on an ongoing basis to get feedback, because we're hearing from we've heard from 2 parents tonight, of a level of dissatisfaction. I'm sure there are kids that love it and don't, but if we're running out of things and what's left isn't there, or if by chance there's moldy food or whatever, it'd be helpful to know, to be able to identify if there's a real issue.
So
Yeah,
you're saying that,
oranges don't go moldy from first period to third period.
I'm sorry, that's gotta be a fluke though. Was it in the machine? Where were they?
I don't know. She's got pictures though.
Yeah, no, I'm sure it's true, Susan, trust me. Didn't we load the oranges into the machine? So maybe it came out of there.
so,
It's the wellness committee's changes that, so I'm a student for 12 seconds. the wellness committee changed the food and took everything out of the cafeteria that I like to eat, therefore
Yeah, we
I
don't
will
have the
never
tater
eat
tots.
in there again.
We don't have the tater tots, we don't have little smiley faces, we don't have anything with the big
Chocolate
old delicious,
muffins,
yeah, no more chocolate chip muffins.
We only have whole wheat bagels and not plain ones, so
That's
I'm
right.
starving and I got a headache
So,
instead of eating.
I agree with that it's good to stay on top of this, but I think that we should shelf this until the manager's back.
I
Because
agree.
I don't
No, I
think that
agree.
putting any extra burden on temporary staff
I'm just saying,
makes
long
any
term, it
sense.
might be good practice a few times a year to just take their temperature, but I agree, we gotta have the staff back.
All right, I'd like to make a motion to convene to executive session to talk about our latest round of negotiations with Cash and also to discuss the employment of a particular person.
So moved?
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.